Live from Studio A in PressCorps World Headquarters, this is Zero Dark PressCorps. It's a live, community-based call-in show, fielding your thoughts on and tales from the Foxhole War. So join the Discord right now through the link below, sign in through the call queue text channel, and hop in the voice lounge for a chance to share your story. Tonight's developer guest, lead developer, Mark Foot. And now, your host, 13-time winner of the Geoffrey Jennings Award for Excellence in Journalism, Geoffrey Jennings.
Okay. All right. Welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps, just as the man said, on a very special 2 o'clock Eastern time. As soon as I found out that I could do it at this time, I immediately messaged Mark saying, hey, can you do this? I know it's during your work hours, but we had discussed trying to get one of these things at an earlier time zone for us, just so we can get our European, I should open up the call queue, but just so we can get our European audiences, everyone send messages there. European audiences involved with the show, and yeah, you know what? Because this is a special time, and I don't want to waste any more time. I'll go right into our first question, and I'll keep it to one topic here. Really, I'll try and keep it short and sweet. So, Mark, by the way, if you're not sure, Mark is the lead developer over at Siege Camp Games. Is it just Siege Camp or Siege Camp Games?
It's just Siege Camp.
Just Siege Camp. So he's the lead developer over at the newly anointed Siege Camp. So my question here is, what have the developers observed in terms of weather's effects on combat as well as logistics? Like, what are the developers like? Observations on it.
We've seen. I mean, a lot of the feedback that you've read out there is what we've seen. One very notable thing is that a lot of the major. Okay, so one of the things that we know did happen in the last war is a lot of the major pushes during the storm happened outside of the storm, right? So that's some objective, tangible outcomes, right? So we know that in the operations that move the needle of the front line were happening outside of the storm. So that could be a variety of reasons. You know, the obvious one is that players that they felt that perhaps the ones that would usually do this sort of push to move the needle didn't like to operate in snow. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe a safe assumption. So that's, yeah, I think that was one of that was one of the obvious ones. Yeah. Maybe I'll leave it at that.
So like, are there any plans on adding systems to better predict or demarcate the weather?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the unfortunate things with weather is that because we had some technical problems along the way, we weren't able to test it as much as we want to be. But we don't want necessarily weather to be as binary of a mechanic as it is now. Like, sort of, there's no snow and suddenly there's a lot of painful snow, right? Ideally, it's sort of more natural feeling. It sort of more just feels like it's part of the world, as opposed to this, okay, Debs flipped some switch, or at least that's what it feels like. Like, it feels like some switch was flipped, and now we have to deal with XYZ. Rather, we wanted it in the longer run, and it was kind of like by design to feel more like an ambient thing. That, don't get me wrong, does ramp up to really big events, like the snowstorm in the last war, but it won't. It should feel less like a switch right now. Like, maybe you'll have milder weather more often, weather that is mild enough that in most cases doesn't even affect your gameplay experience. It's just more like a visual thing, and then you have the big storms, then you have everything in between. But ultimately, the goal is to make it feel a lot more natural than it is right now, and we'll see where that goes. Right?
Want to make it feel more natural, but at the same time, you don't think the effects are too. They don't interrupt gameplay too much, or like to such an extent that it kind of defeats the purpose of the game, or is that part of the intent? By defeats the purpose of the game. I meant more like in combat. So I think it's safe to say, just overall, that combat is meant to slow down during at least severe weather events, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's in
So what?
between.
Yeah, the balance of that.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that? Based on
yeah,
a lot of the feedback we see.
yeah. So I think um, I think that it can probably I don't want to I don't want to. I'm trying to think about. It's definitely our intention, as you say, for it to disrupt
Slow down.
more.
Period. Just slow down in
Otherwise,
general.
yeah, like otherwise, if it doesn't do anything, what's kind of the point of weather at all, right?
Mhm.
However, I think what we want to aim to do, right, is make it less of this absolute um uh so there's like, okay, more of a gray area, right? If that makes sense. So like an example of this would be, rather than um this is an example, right? This is not necessarily what we're doing, but
Okay.
sort of the, the line of thinking is like, rather than it being, oh well, you just freeze to death, right? And there's a certain amount of time, and after like whatever that time period is, then you freeze to death. It would be more like, maybe you don't freeze to death, maybe you just get a frostbite state or something, and that
So
affects your,
like a nerf, not a nerf, but a debuff.
like a debuff, sort of like the bleeding state, where it won't just be this black and white. Okay, well, you're playing, and then suddenly you die, right? But maybe there's more of a gray area. So that's so the part of the part that we've seen that we're not entirely happy with is that black and white. You're just playing, and then suddenly you die, and it just feels strangely abrupt. And
There is a visual indicator on the body
there
of
is a
your
visual
character,
indicator,
but it
lets you
does feel very,
exactly.
it's just
So
you're completely fine, and then you just drop dead.
exactly. So you kind of hit the nail on the head there, and that's the feedback that we have seen. And I think that we'd like to make it feel more like a gray area. But I do want to say that it is never going to be just, well, here's snow, everyone's just happy, and and then nothing changes. It's still going to be
And
harsh, but in ways that are have more shades of gray, right? Maybe I'll just
this
leave it at
doesn't
that.
always happen, but there are times where the most severe of like maximum snowstorm, right? Let's take that for example. Maximum snowstorm dialed up to 10. That will kill a front, or at least, yeah, it will kill a front and it will kill like all fighting. People will try and do it, but then they'll quickly freeze to death. Is that too harsh, or is that as intended?
You know, I think that um, the part that, well, it's intended as designed, right?
Hmm.
Is it working out? Like I said, I think I would like to see more shades of gray. So it's not like it's not like I- it's not like I don't want there to ever be a case where it's that harsh, right? If that makes
Hmm.
sense. But rather than it being like 100% of the time when a weather event is on, it's like that. That should perhaps be like more like 10% of the time. Like, does that make sense? Whereas the rest of the time, it's more shades of gray. It's more, like maybe you get a frostbite state. Maybe it's way slower, right? Most of the time. But so I won't necessarily say like I never want it to be as harsh as it is now, but I think just more, again, I keep going back to it, just more steps in there, right? More shades of gray,
More
more,
shades of gray, and possibly an extension Is that thought on the table? Extending the time it is to die, purely from cold.
As part of the shades of gray, yes. Like that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. Is like a concrete example of what that might look like in the future is like rather than it being okay, a snowstorm's going to come for 5 days. A switch flips on for 5 days. It's what it was like, right? What the ideal would be might be okay for 1 or 2 of those days. Maybe there's more ramp up. Maybe it's you know, it's more like slower, as you said, or you get a frostbite state, but it doesn't kill you. And then maybe it spikes up to this really harsh point for like a couple of hours or half a day or something, right? As an example, where it is totally like, okay, this front is shut down, right? But then it comes back down and then maybe it goes back up, as opposed to this like 5 days straight of the same, you know,
Yeah.
switch on type of thing. It's like varies and just kind of making it more interesting, which is why I'm very careful. I'm very hesitant to be like, oh yeah, that's just totally never should be like that, right? You know what I'm
So
saying?
I know we're focusing a lot on
Yeah.
snow. There is absolutely a rain aspect that affects,
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
as well. But I think winter and the cold has been a very,
Yeah.
it's been kind of a pain point for a lot of people, and it's certainly on a mental level as well. So, moving on from that, plans on adding some sort of way to better endure the effects of weather, such as winter clothing or rain gear. Is that on the table?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think
Now,
I'm. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So would weather resistant modifiers negate the point of weather, or is that a balancing act that you have to play with?
Um. Definitely a balancing act, and I think this goes back to what I was saying with the shades of gray. It's like right now it's just this binary switch. But let's say we
Hmm.
added things like being able to put on a snowsuit, right? But then
Uh-huh.
like that has a logistical requirement, as an example. Then now you're not just dealing with the switch, right? Where the only lever we give you to deal with the switch is fire pits right now. If it was, let's take those shades of grays um, in the weather events, and then you add in more tools, then now it becomes more interesting because it's not just this, you know, one thing that happens. It's like, okay, it happens, it varies. There's more ways we can deal with it, and then it becomes a lot more interesting, right? So, again, that's why I'm very careful to not say, yeah, it's somehow black and white bad. We're gonna, we just have to make
If
it
you put
not as
on this
bad.
winter coat, you will not feel the effects of any kind of cold
Yeah,
at all.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, what do you think like, does the idea of snowsuit sound s- sound exciting to you, and like why, right?
Yes, and it depends, right? So specifically snowsuit. That one's less exciting to me, just because it's actually interesting because it would be the first cosmetic and it would be the first wearable item. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. It'd be the first cosmetic and the first wearable item that would change the model that is produced in mass. Full disclosure: the PressCorps does have a uniform, and we're privileged to be granted that by the developers. But yeah, and then maybe something like snowshoes. Although, do you slow down with snow? I forget. Sorry, when I play during in the snow, I don't like combat at all. I just like hanging out with people with fire pits, and just building. That's how I play it. But yeah, something like snowshoes or rain boots, something like that to better endure, but not um, necessarily negate anything. And there's also the thought of the strain on logistics. Everyone says like we want winter clothes, and it's like, are there going to be two different types of shirts now? Is it going to be like that?
Yeah, yeah. I think we would want a logistical requirement for something like that. So
Yeah, for sure.
whether that's a different shirt or some other item that you have to equip, it just makes sense in Foxhole that nothing, everything has a logistical
Mhm.
requirement,
A
right?
different shirt would be interesting, and also a different shirt would be interesting because um, what if there's no weather event at that point in time, but all you have is winter clothes, so it's normal and sunny.
You're gonna force
Um,
people to wear thick coats out in the sun.
and that
Sounds
would be because you can't fight naked, unfortunately. But you, maybe that could be like a debuff as well. It's like, okay, you're putting on a winter coat when it's like 70 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
actually, I heard some.
So then, yeah, there's a weight. You overheat maybe. I don't know. I'm purely spitballing at this point.
Actually, you know what is cool? I heard a suggestion from the community before about how gas masks could um, obscure your vision. So
Yes, I'm actually a proponent of that. I like that.
So it's not just a buff. It's not just like, okay, put this on, it fixes the problem, right? It's like
Right.
put it on, fixes the problem, but there's something worse, right? So
Yeah.
that was a really cool idea.
And well, I also think gas should be non-lethal, but that's a whole different conversation. Let's get to our callers and hopefully some more thoughts about weather, because weather is such a whole thing. We can dedicate a whole show to that. So, our first person in the call queue is actually a frequent caller on the America's time zone. So they have volunteered to skip. We thank them for that. So we will now go to our first person, 3SP, member of the 3SP regiment, Afrowner. Did I say that right? He might still be getting oriented. Hello.
Hi, sorry.
Afrowner, thank you.
It's
Afrowner.
like wearing one on your head.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, what do you have for us here?
Oh, I have a lot actually.
Okay.
I have
sorry.
like
I should also. I should.
questions.
Yeah. So a couple of things I should
mention. If we have the time.
I should mention that there is a 7-minute soft limit, not starting now, of course, but there is a 7-minute soft limit. We can go past that time, of course, if the conversation is good enough. But also, if there are two members of a regiment that are back to back, then we will put someone in between so that a regiment doesn't own the night. So, hey, Afrowner, thank you so much for making your debut here on the show, and I'll start the soft time limit now.
Okay, hi. First of all, greetings to the Colonial Jäger Forces, the other German clan on the colonial side. Es ist Mittwoch, meine Kerle. Just for the memes. I have a technical question regarding the Steam sockets. What would be like the actual technical benefits of them?
Yeah, there's a lot of actually like if you Google Steam sockets, Steam networking sockets, there's quite a few articles that talk about it. But the main benefit is what it actually does is it puts the communications to our servers onto the relay network that Valve uses for their own games like Dota, and I believe Counter-Strike probably uses it as well. So the intended benefit is that on average latency across the world is reduced to the server. Now this doesn't equate to be clear, this doesn't equate to an absolute benefit for everyone, right? What it theoretically equates to is an average improvement across the board, right? So, like someone who may have been experiencing extremely higher ping before might suddenly get, or really bad latency might get better latency. But someone who was already getting very, very good latency, theirs could possibly be slightly worse, but not worse in a way that it would matter in a game like Foxhole. So sort of like the average experience would uh, theoretically be better, right? And another thing is another big benefit is besides that is the robustness of your connection. So we've done tests before where we would induce a bunch of you can use tools to introduce noise into your network to simulate what it's like if you have a bad connection. So like for example, if your internet isn't very reliable or you're on like Wi-Fi connection that is weak and kind of spotty, um, we found that Steam sockets actually maintains your connection much better, right? So whereas previously, if you're say on a spotty Wi-Fi connection, on average, you should drop less. So you should stay connected to the servers. Server travel should work better. Now, when it comes to networking, to be clear, like nothing ever translates into an absolute improvement across the board for everyone, right? So what we're looking for is average improvements. So yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that actually sounds nice, like leveling the player field for everyone.
Yeah.
Then my second question would be, I know that you guys are developing on the R2 engine. I don't want to talk about any future projects. What would be interesting for me, or like maybe for everybody, would be like in the like long term probably. Would it be technically possible to actually move Foxhole to that engine, or will we always be locked on whatever engine you're currently using?
In the foreseeable future, it's not in the card, so there isn't any plans in the next 1 to 2 years, let's say. Moving Foxhole over to the R2 engine would basically require us to rewrite the game from scratch. Maybe there's some code that could be salvaged, but it will pretty much be a total rewrite.
Okay, so probably Foxhole 2.0 then.
Uh, if such a thing
Well,
will
if
never
it would
happen,
happen, yes.
yeah,
Foxhole 2.
yeah. I don't want to do Foxhole 2. I'd rather keep improving Foxhole because there's just still so many. There's just so like the ceiling is so high that at the point when we would start thinking we're running out of ideas and we're scraping the barrel, like you know how when movie franchises start turning to space as their theme because it like
Yeah.
they run out of ideas. It's like Friday the 13th 6. It's like finally we're going to space because we've exhausted everything. I think for Foxhole, if we start feeling that way, then
Yeah, sure, totally
think
get
about it.
you.
But right now, there's like this. It's the opposite. There's like lots of stuff. Yeah.
Maybe just like a small note to that, I think for some people in the community, it would be really awesome to have the possibility to actually experience a war with like 300 or 400 people at the same time, but obviously that wouldn't
Here
be
is something.
possible in the current version, right?
Yes, but here is something though. Like, we can take lessons that we learn in R2 Engine and what we have in Foxhole, right? And there's still optimizations in Foxhole that we haven't done yet. So it's not like if you look at Foxhole right now, yesterday at the war start, servers are pushing like, 200 and 230 players, right? Like 220, 230. And when we started out, we were at 100, like 120, and
So
we've
can
gone
you
100.
confirm that it is like 100 max per faction and then like plus like 15 for Logi, something like that?
It varies because it varies depending on how many people have a reserve, how many. I don't want to talk about that too much because I don't want people to try like game
Is it
the
safe?
queues.
Is it safe to
But
say that you shouldn't assume that because a region is at max capacity, there is automatically 100 colonials and 100 wardens? That
oh
assumption
yeah,
Yes,
should
I
not be
there's a
made,
believe
lot
right?
so.
of there's a lot of factors, but maybe I'll say this: when it is under the conditions where it can have the most number of players in the server, it's well over 200, like well over like 220 about is when we start, we can get there quite safely. And in fact, at the start of the war, it's actually like can support more. So that first day when you get that charge, it's actually servers barely even flinch because um the structures when people start building tons. See, this is why like um there's a lot of garrison supplies. Everyone's favorite in quotes thing is necessary because the structures is actually what brings down the numbers. That's the thing that is a burden because the server has to
Ah,
process. There's like thousands of. I don't think people understand. There's thousands of structures that are in regions, right? Within a single region, right? So
sure,
it's a
like
lot.
every mine is a
Yeah,
structure basically.
yeah.
Okay,
We
sure,
are
gotcha.
we are at time. Afrowner, did you want to throw in a real quick
Okay,
question?
I like two things from the clan then, please. One would be like a suggestion that actually is from like our clan. We kind of talked about it. Um, to reduce the toxicity in the community, for one war, maybe make it possible to like switch all the warden players and all the colonial players, probably with their own like design for the player character, so they don't feel alienated. Just like switch starting positions and switch tech tree to experience the game from the other side.
And you
Maybe.
just play the other faction?
Yes, exactly. But you are like your faction, but everything is changed. Yes.
I
Just
think
as
that's
an idea.
personally, I think that's a kind of a waste of time. I don't know. Just like move your
Yeah.
group over to the other faction. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's not
Mark,
about
what are your
moving the
thoughts?
group. It's about moving like the whole community basically, because
There've been a
wardens
lot of
wouldn't ever change, and colonials I think as well wouldn't.
there've been a lot of lore people that have been angry about us about entertaining that thought in the past. So I don't think we're gonna do it. I've heard that suggestion before, but it's like I'm trying to decide, is that really gonna, if we did that once, let's say, what's the long term, unless we're always doing it, then maybe there's a benefit. But doing it once and then leaving it alone, I don't think that's it's you know, it's a neat idea, don't get me wrong, but it's like it would be a short term thing. Even if we did it and everyone was like, "Wow, let's be friendly now. Let's not be toxic." It's what's going to happen next month, right? So, if we were to do something like that, I think it would have to be like, which I don't think we will, but if we were to, it would have to be something that would help in the long run for
Now, Mark,
Sure.
one thing you could do
Yeah.
is have it be dynamic, where every war, doesn't necessarily restart. But that's a whole other conversation. Afrowner, thank you so much
Well, one
for.
thing, please.
Yeah,
We are
okay.
like the main building clan on the warden side, or at least that is like our perception. And for any building update in any future, please give us like a mobile concrete producing vehicle or anything that can like transport made concrete like a wheelbarrow. Please, please, that would be so nice and awesome. Thank you very much for having me. You can now move me. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, man.
Mark, is there a reason why it's it's static?
Yeah, it's static because we wanted concrete to we didn't, what we found was any in the past, any really beefy, this is like going back way long, like years ago. If you give players a really beefy type of defense to build, it'll be used offensively. Like they would just build concrete as part of their line that they creep up, right?
So to slow
Um,
it down, you literally took
so
out the wheels.
so if we said to build the most fortified thing in the game, you have to plan it out, and you want to put it in someplace safe because you want your concrete to be safe. You're not going to just like put concrete at the front, or it takes
Mhm.
time. Then just imagine, like, you know how right now when you see people creeping their foxholes up, imagine you can do that with concrete, right? So that's
Yeah.
was the by design thing, right? But I don't know. There could be ways, right? Could be ways we can. I'm not
Could be.
against adding tools to help with stuff like
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
All right, coming up next, we have Blackhouse. Blackhouse, welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. Probably getting oriented there. Just a reminder that I am recording this locally, so if at any point the stream does drop out, then we will still, the question and the conversation will still go on. Additionally, we do have a documentary. We are working on a War 75 documentary, mini doc, on the last stages, the last 250 days up until the end of War 75. We have a survey. If you stop by the PressCorps Discord, I'm still waiting for Blackhouse to turn on his mic. But if you Oh, there we go. Yeah, stop by the PressCorps Discord. Go ahead and answer that survey, because we need as much data as possible to get a comprehensive view of for that to get the facts on that mini doc. But in any case, Blackhouse, thank you so much for stopping by Zero Dark PressCorps. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so basically, with all these new tanks and all these new wheelchairs, like, I wanted to ask, like, what's the vision of these things? Like, for example, the MPT and the
Did you
Spafa.
say the vision?
Like,
I'm sorry.
yes, I said
Okay.
that. So basically, like, the MPT, it's a better version of a light tank, and the Spafa is a better version of the MPT. Like, I don't see the point of even having these things. Like, they're just beefed up light tanks, and that makes light tanks useless late game. Like fundamentally, these tanks don't really make sense. Like things like the Silverhand, those were great. Like those are great examples of asymmetry. Like what happened with these things?
Are you, so to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying? You're saying things like the Spatha and the Falchians are making the light tanks obsolete, and making them pointless.
Not
That
not just not just the MPT and the Spafa, like even these new wheelchairs. Like once you get to the 40mm, the high velocity wheelchairs, like there's no reason to use the previous versions. Like it makes that kind of like one like linear, and it kind of makes it boring, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you, and this is one of the. I agree with actually everything that you said. So
I'm glad, honestly. I'm glad.
Yeah, no. This is one of our top. So, do you mind if I actually even add to your so like um so you're talking about the power creep, right?
Yes, exactly.
So
Yeah.
so there's the power creep. There's things like why use a medium tank over a light tank. So and then there's the tank spam, right? So let me just say that this is at the top of our list of things that we're trying to address. We think that to do this, um, we're we're going to review how we are reviewing how tank armor works, because we think there can be a more it can work in such a way that would mitigate the power creep, right? So that light tanks have more of a reason to exist, as one example, over the medium tanks. And with our goal with the field gun and with the field guns, and I understand that this is not going to happen. This might not work exactly as I'm saying right off the bat. But the goal is that we we want field guns to be good against tanks, tanks to be good against infantry, and infantry to be good against the field guns. So this is the goal. This is in the next couple of months. Let's try to work towards it. It's not going to work perfectly out of the gate, but that's sort of the um, balance between those three type of weapons in the game. And then so those are basically the two things that we're looking at right now. Is one, reviewing the way that tank armor works so that um, power creep is mitigated, and trying to make sure that tanks have a proper counter, and the counter to that also has a proper counter. Um, and then besides that, there's also other things that we're looking into, like smaller things, to make some of the the earlier game um, content less of just this linear downgrade from the later game content. Like there's also small things here and there that we're gonna look at. I won't say that like I think that I don't think the outcome is going to be, in the end game you're gonna roll up with an armored car and expect like that to be sort of moving the needle of your front line. But I think we can do a better job at making them making them still relevant in some way, even if it's not the main needle mover, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, also a second question I had. Recently, there's been popping up a lot of like Reddit posts and stuff on Discord about like map exploits. Like even back in War 73, there was this one base in Moors that was built on a like what was thought of a unreachable land with a CV. And last war, this all the glitch with the bulwark popped up, and like people keep calling for these like bans. Like, what's your stance on these like map exploits? Like, do you actually want to like punish these people, or like you've made this statement like a long time ago that these glitches are so partially your fault, so you don't want to ban people for these things? Like, so is that still valid, or did something change, or can we expect some bans or no?
Yeah, so um, definitely not gonna talk about any moderation policy on the show, but I think at the end of the day, we just need to fix those bugs and fix them in. Unfortunately, sometimes during a war, there might be such an issue, and then we and then we wanna and then we have to address it, but we have to address it in some sort of a more temporary way until the next patch. But really, I think we need to just be more like proactive about it, right? Like the
Proactive about the bug fixing or
about these sorts of issues, right? So yeah, I think it's like, okay, if an issue starts coming out once or twice, then it should be something that we shouldn't. We should try our best to like not let those things slip through the crack anymore, right? So
Yeah, sure, but I think it would be like nice for players to know what, like, if they're like, if it's a bannable offense or no. I think that's good to tell people, because people, if people do it, like if they're supposed to do it, if they're not supposed to do it, it gets kind of confusing, and then you get blamed for it, and players get blamed for it, and starts a shit show for no reason. So just a clear statement on this. Not even like now, but in the future, like if you can make these things like clearer.
The issue with a clear statement is that if they say, "Hey, this is just me talking," but like, if Mark says, "Yeah, all map exploits are bannable offenses," they can't find them all. I don't know. And then you start possibly witch hunts. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah,
And then
witch
meanwhile, while
hunts
they're
are
banning
exactly
people,
what's happening.
well, yeah. I mean, how much time do you want to spend with them banning people as opposed to them actually fixing the
I'm
issue in
just
the first place?
asking if they're gonna ban people for it or not. That's what I'm asking.
It's tough, man. It's harder than it sounds.
There should be like a bar, like to measure if something's bannable or not. So just.
But every case is
just asking.
specific. No, I know. Yeah, no. It's a good question. It's just a very difficult answer. It's not as easy as like, hey, this person team killed me 10 times in a 2-minute period.
I'm looking like map exploits in specific, not like like briefing and stuff.
Well, we could go into specifics, but unfortunately we can't. So we have to just talk in broad strokes. So, Mark, can you close out with anything on that?
yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to at the end of the day, like things are going to be not every when you say something like a map exploit or even use the word exploit, it's so broad. I mean, like, wouldn't you agree that that's
Do you mean like being able to climb a mountain? Because I've climbed mountains before,
yeah,
and it's like,
so-
hey,
exactly.
you can't.
so
like things
okay,
like
so
the
like,
Ocean Watch
yeah.
Mountain that are clearly not
So-
intended because they got a broken hitbox. It's obvious they're not supposed to be there.
Yeah. So maybe I'll close out with
Is
this.
it obvious though? I don't know.
It's
Okay,
very obvious if you've
okay,
ever
so
been
maybe
there.
yeah.
All right. Okay. Sorry. Go. Let Mark talk. We'll let Mark.
No, I
finish.
was gonna say maybe I'll maybe I'll put this out there. It's like when you say exploit or map exploit, right? The range of things that covers is broad. Do you have a very narrow definition or like?
How about height? Let's talk about height,
It's
right? Let's go back to that mountain thing. There are certain parts of the map where there are these big mountains and huge cliffs, and you can climb them. There are ways to climb them, either through like just finding the right place to hit spacebar, or maybe building sandbags. So, for instance, Mark, if the only way to get up to an elevation is through building sandbag steps, I think you've seen that before. You know what I'm talking about, right? Is that an exploit? Is that bannable, or is that just like unfortunate, but not bannable?
Again, it's just go back to what I'd say. Like you can't if you just say if you put a black and white, you know, rule on something like that, then the range of things that can happen is so broad, right? Like you can climb. What things are you using to climb? If you actually get to some area and are able to perform some, I'm just making this up, right? If there was that resulted in a bug that let you like travel across the world or something, and then we just say like, yeah, climbing is fine. Someone might say, well, you said climbing is fine, right? Um, but you didn't specify this part, which is why I'm asking like, is like, you know, um, do you feel like there will be some broad rule that would apply to every situation?
Like maybe not even like broad rule, but for example, the base in Moors, like even the creators of that base try to reach out to you, and like if it's legitimate or not, and you did not respond in any capacity, so then it makes like if you're not going to define rules, and then you're not going to respond, like even when people ask you about it, then it makes it very difficult for the player to anticipate what they're gonna do and what's like allowed, what's not allowed. Like pick one. I think that's. If
Well, it's a case-by-case
if I'm
basis,
making any
right?
sense. Yeah, exactly. But like, if you're gonna go case-by-case basis, then like respond to those cases. You can't like have not a flat rule nor a case-to-case basis thing.
I think the real answer is Siege Camp. The developers need to hire like 10 more community managers from all across different time
Yeah,
zones.
so I think that
I'm
would be a
like
good
half kidding.
solution. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I mean,
I don't know.
moderators need to be in this game, but it's not like sustainable. I don't think.
I don't know. I'm sorry that the answer has got to be inconclusive, but it's also really a hard thing to answer because you can. I've been in situations where I'm shooting from above and it's like I just hit spacebar in the right places. This isn't. I don't think I'm cheating or exploiting. It's.
No, I'm not
just
saying
got a
you
good position.
are. I'm not saying you are. I'm just asking if it's allowed or not.
But
like,
every situation. Okay, we're going in circles. But hey,
yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
It's situation. Hey, Blackhouse, thank you so much. Hey,
Wait, if I can just have a closing statement, please don't
okay.
please don't give the smokes BT treatment where you take him out of the game for a year. Just please like add him back like next war or like the next war. Like just please add him back. It's unplayable. Thank you.
It's gone for a year. I'm just kidding.
I would not be surprised, honestly. Thank you. I love you, Mark.
Blackhouse, thank you so much for stopping by. Good call.
Yes.
All right. Coming up next. Okay, so coming up next is 82DK. Yes. Okay. Looks like they're all here. Am I missing anyone?
Yes.
Oh, Razor. I don't know why Razor. Okay, there we go. Is everyone here? Relying on you for that?
Yeah, I think we had one guy, but he couldn't make it. Oh, no, we do have him. It's
there we go. There's
Kazanski. It's
Kazanski.
Kazanski. He doesn't have
Not that guy. Not Sar.
Okay.
Sorry,
Cool.
Will.
Now, I will give more time to this call, obviously, but we'll try to keep it also on pace. But in any case, yes, 82DK. Thank you so much for stopping by. With this special time that we're in, go for it. What do you have for us?
We need Kazanski moved in, Zar moved out.
Yeah. Sorry. There's a lot of us.
Anyone else? I don't see any tags.
He does not tag his Kazanski, the squirrel. He just joined the.
Put on the tag.
Yeah. Sorry.
There we go. That's all right. That's fine.
He just showed up last minute, so it was a bit hard.
All right, go for it.
I'll just start. My plan sort of got sidetracked because Mark started talking about power creep all of a sudden. so he blindsided me on that one. But I'll try and adapt my line of questioning. I know he already talked about them being aware of it, so I'm not gonna sit too much on the Silverhand mortar half track LTD sort of timeline there. One thing I wanted to sort of bring up is how the tools to counter stuff haven't been really updated, and I really hope that's going to be more considered in the future. I'll give you just a quick example. The LTD, for example, right? It would get constantly countered by grenade launchers. If you remember, we used it a lot like that. Or mortars. That's another example. We used to use mortars against open top. These days, you need 40 shells to maybe get a quick decrew in there. Also, I still feel like it's still part of this. Like a lot of the items that we sort of give up on, shotguns are not a great example here. But even with new weapons, I don't know how you guys see it, but from where we're standing, I see a lot of people just not liking a lot of the new weapons. And it's really sad because some of them, I was personally really excited to use them. But once they got tested in combat and stuff, they really felt underwhelming. I'll give you just a quick example on the free tap rifle on the Warden side. From the description, it looked like this crazy gun that can shoot bursts at long range, but its range is really, really small compared to what a rifle is expected to be. That's just one example. Another quick example would be the grenade, the Warden grenade, which is basically our Logi team deleted it from our list of stuff to prepare for operations. They're just that bad, because if you're in range of where you can throw a grenade, you're most likely not gonna have time to throw it. You're better off just fighting with your gun, right? So those are just some sort of ideas. I know how much is gonna help you, but I still wanted to share on power creep the way we see it, right? It also feels. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to pause, because there was a couple of, just to make sure I heard it all correctly. There was mortar accuracy, specifically in the context of being able to decrew LTDs, right? There was
or any open top at all. That's just fine. Best example.
You felt AT flask if you were already in range. You just use something else, so you felt it was not
so
that useful.
With AT flask, I think I would just discuss the travel time on the AT flask, because I'll give you an example. The stickies have less travel time, so even if they may be less effective against vehicles, you have way better odds of basically getting your target and sticking them. But go ahead.
That one was interesting because in the dev branch, there was a lot of concern over that being overpowered, and we tuned the flight speed as the bounce tweak. But maybe we can go back and look at it again. And then, sorry, there was a rifle in there that I didn't quite get which rifle you were talking about.
The broker.
Sorry, I didn't know the actual name of it.
Yeah.
I was personally very excited for it. From your description and from how it sounded, how you guys made it, sound, it just like felt such a fun weapon to use. And then I don't want to speak for the Colonials, but I think their free top rifle is also sort of underwhelming from what I heard from them commenting.
What do you want out of the Booker if you wanted it to be buffed in a way that you felt was fair?
So I'll tell you what I was expecting from it, from how you guys presented it. I was expecting for it to have way better range, being a rifle, right? And just giving you that possibility of staggering enemies out of range with it. I felt like that's a huge bonus. You could even like combine it with other weapons that it can basically stagger the enemy, and then other weapons can finish them off. Or
I can weigh in on that. The issue is that it doesn't fit in any of the ranges that you would want to compete with it, right? Like if you would rather have a storm rifle than a Booker for that mid to close, you'd rather have a rifle if you're playing it long, and so it doesn't really fit any of the roles that you might look to use it in very well, I guess. And so when you're looking at how you supply it or how you select your equipment, it's very difficult to prioritize that over one of the other alternatives. And so, like to Razor's point, something I thought could be interesting is if it had range similar to a rifle, but its stability was jank or took a lot longer, so that it could be used from a prepared position a lot more effectively and a lot more lethally. That could give it some game, perhaps. Like maybe that's a way to look at it, but just a thought.
Cool.
Just so we don't miss it, the actual Warden grenade, the standard one that basically comes from first day.
Yeah, the
pineapple. Yeah, the range of it, like I said, I don't know about other people, but for us, Logi doesn't even bring it anymore because they just told us you guys don't use it, so we're not gonna waste time of production and supplies on it.
Gotcha.
Moving on here, I'm not gonna sit on armor too much because I already heard you wanna tweak it, and I think that's great. My only input would have been to like take the RNG out of it as much as possible. That's my opinion. I feel like that's the main thing that's wrong with armor. You depend on a roll of dice, and if you played XCOM, 99 most of the time might not be good enough. So
XCOM's a great game, by the way. I love it. But separate to your point,
yeah. No, I was just mentioning it because I'll give you a Foxhole example. There were cases, and not only one, where I'll give you an HTD, for example, would get one shot in from the enemy, and that shot would immediately like disable one subsystem and go through its armor. And it, it's underwhelming to be like in what you thought is going to be a heavy tank destroyer that just doesn't bounce the first shot and just gets disabled. Now, I'm not saying this cannot happen, but you just expect to be that 1 in a million sort of thing, not a thing that is possible a lot. in my eyes at least. The only other thing I have, mostly on tank balance, and then I'll open it up to Kaz here, is, to me personally, I think the 45-meter range idea of combat in Foxhole is not working out. That's just me. I'll explain even why. It forces a lot of people to change resolutions, to change aspect ratio. I'm sure you heard of that. They change it to 4.3 so they can see more. I personally will never change it just because I record a lot of Foxhole, so I don't want my videos to look weird just because I want some extra range on. But all of the gunners in tanks, all of them, if they don't do that, they're underachieving. They're always going to disappoint their crews because the enemy is going to shoot them and they're not going to shoot back. And I think you can see the frustration in that. I'm sure you get what I'm talking about from how I explained it, hopefully.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree fully that 45. I was actually just talking to Max. Well, first of all, this is something that we're looking into. And second of all, this specific 45-meter issue was something I was just talking to Max about. I think just even 2 days ago. And yeah, I think it expands out into a larger issue. It's just it's not really 45 meters. It's the camera limitations that make 45 meters.
Yeah, I agree. Like, if you could just scroll out more, that wouldn't be a problem. If you remember that little thing we had at some point where everybody was able to zoom out a lot because a thing somebody found to change the point of view and just bring it up a lot, right? Stuff wouldn't render in, but you'd be able to see everything around you without needing to do the corner aim, which is another thing I desperately hope you guys are gonna abolish at some point because especially for new guys, I'm telling you from experience from teaching them, it's so hard. Like it's so hard to master, and it sometimes gets so frustrating for a new player to be shot off screen. For him, it feels off screen. It's not actually off screen, but yeah, well, I really hope it.
It's not just that. I mean, that's obviously a problem, but I think besides just looking at the problems that the camera, improving the camera doesn't only fix problems. I think it also opens up opportunities, like just giving you more situational awareness on the average, right? So like being able to know where someone has set up a machine gun a lot more easily without having to fiddle with your camera so much or use a pair of binos. Just being able to know, just being aware of more things around you, I think would enhance the game beyond fixing the very specific problems that you mentioned there, right? So
yeah, I definitely agree. The last thing I'm going to end here and let Kaz take over is, for me personally, the tank combat should be slower. We shouldn't be having vehicles just zooming around like that right now. That's just my personal opinion. I would rather see it more static and just more balanced as a whole. I personally like your idea of vehicles having pros and cons, and this is why I personally, while I love to play with the Spafa when we steal it from the Colonials, I don't feel like it fits in with the rest of the tanks solely because of that. I know, I'm curious to hear your opinion on it. I personally can't really find a flaw to it, aside from the other tanks. Like even the LTD, it's open top. That's his weakness. I'm looking at the Spafa and I'm not seeing weaknesses. I'm seeing a Panther.
Like you think it's too well rounded?
I definitely think so, because it also does really well against buildings, which is a big factor. For example, like two Spafa and an LTD can one tap AT turrets, which is another discussion on its own, where good tank crews can just simply skip AT turrets easily with no problems. But yeah, that's it from me. Kaz, if you want to take over.
Kaz, I think we can give you like a minute
That's all I'll need. I just really had one question. I just wanted to kind of, I guess, maybe hear a little bit from Mark and give some feedback with it. But one of the things that I hear continually, and understand that I mostly play infantry, and I don't care about vehicles. I'm an infantry guy. I love the infantry, and I play infantry like exclusively. And so one of the things that comes to mind that I found, I guess, frustrating for myself, and have had other infantry players express frustration about, is that we feel that there's, I guess, a wasted opportunity in some of the fine tuning options that maybe you can do in the early access process. That is, I know that you guys do change values. I know that you guys adjust values here and there, but I feel like there's more opportunity, like between wars, to do more fine tuning and experimenting with new values on the equipment for like underutilized equipment, or for equipment that is clearly not being utilized as much as other pieces. Why not giving it small fine tuning adjustments here and there, like every war, just to see what happens? Just mix it up and mix it up for players so that we can see more. I've seen most of the changes, and maybe I'm got a bias here, but most of the changes I see seem to be very large changes to a weapon. And this goes way back in time, just the one that comes to mind. But we see an efficiency, like shotguns get a 50% change in the way that they operate. Instead of something subtle like a 5% or a 10% to try to fine tune it, we see larger changes instead of fine tuning adjustments. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you guys look at when you think about balancing tools in general. I'm more focused on infantry, but just in general, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. So before I get into the answer, what you would personally like to see is in the regular updates, that there's a big list in the patch notes of like 30 things, as an example, of like more in the line of 5 to 10% changes.
Yes, very subtle things, just to see if the fine tuning of the weapon can help it be a little bit better. Maybe range is improved a little bit, fire rates adjusted slightly here or there. Just little fine tuning things to try to give some love to underutilized pieces of equipment, and encourage the players to experiment with them further, perhaps, and see if there's a sweet spot to be found with it. Right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the balancing that comes from that comes in the regular updates that aren't. It depends. If we're trying to, sometimes if we introduce something new, then for the in between updates, if we introduce a new mechanic or a new weapon or something, sometimes that is what triggers a balancing on some other content. Because when we introduce something new, it's obviously going to change things, and we need to like balance other content accordingly. Besides that, if we are hearing a lot about something from the community or something in the dev branch, we do review all that feedback, and we'll take a look at it. Sometimes we're like, okay, we took a look at it, seems fine. We're not going to change anything, and sometimes we're like, okay, this makes sense to change. Um, if other things that we rely on, if there is something like very loud that we might be hearing about, and um, it's kind of hard for us to know about it. Sometimes we go to um, Google Analytics and say, okay, is this is actually true? Is it like, oh, this one thing is completely like dominating, and try to look at the numbers in some of those cases and be like, okay, well, how many of those are actually being made? Things like that. So we really try to do like a bit of everything, like just hands-on testing ourselves for things like these, listening to people in the community, and also looking at analytics when it is necessary. I don't think it could just be like any one of those three things, because you might like see something in like the analytics, but if obviously if a lot of people are feeling a certain way, it means something, right? Like it's not just numbers and science. It's also how people feel as well, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess the last thought I'll offer is that from my perspective, I think there's more opportunity there. Like for me, there's continually examples of pieces of infantry equipment that are evidently neglected both in utilization and in their effectiveness. And just taking it some time, even I know my wish list would be like every war, just update a few values here and there, and let people, and that generates excitement and interest in some stuff. Would be my hope, I guess. If I could have anything I wanted with
Oh,
that.
I agree. Yeah, I actually, I like that idea. I think some players feel um, that when that's done, it feels like, sort of just changes are being made for the sake of changes. But I don't personally agree with that. I actually like your philosophy more. To experiment more and to fine tune more, and I do actually feel that um, more of this tuning can be done on a regular basis than what we're doing right now. Sometimes we
Especially in
just
early access journey. Like I would get it if it was not early access, but in early access journey, that's time to get after it, right? And try new things and experiment with values and get people testing things out.
yeah. I think sometimes we kind of like run out of time, and it's like, man, like we should have really allocated more time to look at balancing some of the other things, and then it just kind of happens this way. But I do generally think that more time can be spent on that in the future. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Unfortunately, I think that's all we have time for this specific call. Sorry about that. For
No
the
worries.
others,
Thank you for
No
having
need to
us.
apologize. Thank you.
Can I leave you one last thought, Geoffrey?
Yeah. Oh,
I'll leave one last thought, which is to watch the No Man's Land live podcast at
Okay.
twitch.tv/No Man's Land live. When I want to know when the next one's happening. But yes, go ahead, Razor.
So I just wanted to make sure Mark is aware about those new cheats that are getting advertised for I think for the engine as a whole. I'll
Sorry,
send
the
them a
what?
link. There's a new cheat thing going around, um, like actual cheats that claim they're actually working in Foxhole as well. And I just hoping Mark is aware of it. I'm just bringing this up now. It's not out of the open, but we had a lot of people reporting weird stuff, especially in backlines, and especially regarding to like getting shot out of view at night and stuff like that. I'll make sure to link both you and Mark what I'm talking about privately because I don't want to publicize it more. I just want to make sure Mark is aware.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Cheers.
All right. Coming up next is Hands of Callahan's Maggo, who I believe is getting oriented here. Just a reminder while he gets oriented that I was going to 475 survey, stop by the PressCorps Discord and take that survey because we want to know as many stories as possible. We need at least one story, but there's a good chance you have one from War 75 if you participated in it and want to try and include. There's no guarantees that we'll include everything, otherwise it'll be a 3-hour documentary. But we need those facts. We need more info, and we need more stories just to really know what happened. But in any case, from the hands of Callahan, we have Maggo. Welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. What did you have for us? I'm sorry. Were you also including Shax and Fireman?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, did we do anything notable in War 75, boys? I'm not too sure.
War 75? Was that the one the nuke went off?
It was all break. Your
Oh, that
selfie.
was. Oh, yeah.
I don't think anyone talked about that really. No one remembers that. In any
Yeah,
case,
no, it didn't happen.
what did you have for us?
I think we've all got a couple of little questions, so who wants to go first, I guess, really?
Maggo can go first.
Yeah, I was going to talk about, so, you get to that stale point in your late war or whatever, you got your tank lines and all that. And I was going to ask if we're going to see sort of, like the reintroduction of any of the tools that sort of used to be able to be quite helpful, like late war, like namely the AP and HE shells. I know we've got the 68mm AP for the tank destroyers and whatnot. Even with other vehicles, it gets to that late war stage or whatever, and you get your T2 vehicles and whatnot. But are we going to potentially maybe see any sort of additions to tech trees on the second way round, or the two main things you deal with in late war is walls are concrete and defenses and whatnot, and tank lines. If you have that versatility with the old shell types. When you could choose to send your Logi boys out to spend R mats or HE mats on the advanced shells, you could do things that would they'd sort of choke your tank's ability to do follow one sort of path of combat, but boost it in the other. And I don't know, I really like that versatility in quite like to know if we're going to potentially be able to see that again in the future.
So I understand, you're saying like to have heavier equipment beyond the tech tree that we have right now to help break up the stalemate that ends up in late game. Is that
I think
correct?
he means he misses like when you had the versatility that you could you could have, you know, your tank different loadouts for your tank shells, you know what I mean? Like rather than it just being one, so maybe. Do you mean like more for like light tanks and stuff, Maggo, and you know, to switch out and stuff?
You know, it was realistic and it was fun, and you know, you wouldn't take away the fact you have the heavier 68 shell, especially if you don't have the 75 mils anymore.
Okay, so the multiple ammo types is the specific thing you're saying, or
Yeah, you say maybe on the second time around the tech tree you could unlock it or something. It was nice to be able to, you know, for your light tanks, it was nice to be able to say, right, I'm going to go tank hunting with AP shells, or I'm going to be knocking structures down with H. You know, and it goes back to what someone earlier was saying about making sure. Well, actually, I think it's Blackhouse, who's also in HOC, just doesn't have tags, bless him. But he was saying about power creep and stuff, and like it'd be nice if light tanks could have that option late war if it unlocks the second time around on the tree or something. I don't know, whatever. That you can load out again and say I'm going to have shrapnel shell or HE shell or AP. I know you took stuff like that away to sort of like make it more accessible for newer players. The same with the petrol changes and stuff. And we're all, you know, it's whatever. It's fair enough, isn't it? But it'd be nice to have the option again, maybe late war, to keep the earlier tanks a bit more. You can specialize with them if you so choose to. The situation.
You know, you'd be able to start to take on the medium tanks with your lighter tanks around flanks and whatnot.
Can I also just add an addendum to that? Sorry, just on that same point, directional, like being able to shoot people directionally and doing more damage. I know that you can you can take away armor by hitting them in the back, but the fact that hitting them in the back doesn't do more actual damage anymore, I feel like that takes away a lot from that as well. Because again, if you loaded some tank like light tanks, they're disposable. You load them with AP shells, you do a risky gamble, you attack some tank convoy in the back, and because you're hitting them in the back and the gamble pays off, you would have done a lot of damage back in the day if they was all AP. These days, you know what I mean? It's not quite as effective. It'd be nice if for more hardcore regiments, if they want to do the extra grind, to be able to have that. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So resource cost as well, isn't it? Like, you know, you spend a large amount of resources you could otherwise spend on something as a way to bolster what you've got in it. There's still, you know, there's still the balancing out for the Logi boys of like the cost of things, like.
Yeah. So I actually want to split up your question into two parts. So the first part of providing more options for hardcore players in the end game to kind of specialize and do higher end things that can help break the stalemate. I think that's something we're interested in doing, right? Just like once you reach the end of the tech tree, it'd be cool if there was, if you know, as you're saying, a hardcore player that's okay with more grind, but it's not like mandatory. It's sort of if there is something
if you want to have it.
Yeah, if you want to have it, you can go off and build something cool. I think that's something we're very interested in. The other part is when you're talking about making light tanks kind of powerful enough to fight medium tanks.
Specific circumstances.
Under certain circumstances, through things like ammo types, we've gone back and forth on that one a bit. Obviously, the tier 2 gives a small buff, but definitely not enough to like go up against. I think the thing we've struggled with is we like the gameplay idea, but anytime we've thought more about it, it felt like without, if we could do it in an interesting way that made sense realistically, we would do it. I think just the idea that a light tank can sort of beat out heavier tanks is kind of always, I guess maybe that's my question to you. How would it be done in a way that you would feel it doesn't break the immersion? Because there might be a way. So I'd like to hear from you, actually.
Well, a lot of it's to do with the actual, you know, the resource trade-off, like, and you know the risk, the chancing or whatever. It's not to say like, you know, head to head you'd be able to necessarily take on like an MPT with a light tank or whatever, but say you pulled off like some maneuver, you know, went out away from the safety of your own lines to do a long flank, or you know, hit say a couple of ballistas or like PV in a relic base or something. You know, you've got that time factor, and having something that's it's costly, and you know, if you get intercepted when you're out of the lines, especially with all the the new infantry AT equipment, like leaving your tank line does put you at a big risk. So the trade off is the things you can do, but also the loss. You know, if your tank gets hit and the enemy get your shells, or you just lose everything, a large amount of resources has been gambled and thrown away, much like with the tech system, isn't it?
Yeah, there's some ideas that we've explored have been things like giving earlier tanks mass production, like a mass production bonus after the other higher heavier tanks come out. Some other ideas that we've had to sort of help. This touches upon like the discussion earlier about the power creep. Is some of the ideas we had is like making armor piercing ammo as an example, like 16 millimeter. If that's effective against tank armor, but then other ammo is effective against health, and sort of requiring you more to have both. So it's not like if you just had something like an LTD, that's all you need. Like
that's part of the old sort of triangle we had with it, with the AP, HE, and shrapnel shells. Like if you took an advanced shell type, you'd have that tank that's in the line that takes up a tank slot. Maybe HE to help PVE the turrets, well not necessarily PVE, but help destroy turrets like AT turrets and defenses and whatnot. Another tank comes up against that, you're gonna want to have another tank that's at least got normal shells to be able to combat it. I don't think anything got taken away by having that versatility because of that sort of triangular trade-offs.
Did you take that away because it was some newer players, or some players would go, well, this is unfair, I'm here in a tank I've grinded for, and now I die to him because he's got better shells? Because I do understand that. It's just, it did take a big sort of dynamic away that was fun. Like, it was fun to turn it with AP to the wrong fight, and you're like, well, that's my fault. That's what.
Yeah, I think the big reason why we changed that was we felt like we want to make room for making vehicles in general less versatile, right? So one vehicle can't kind of do it all, and we felt like the ammo allowed certain tanks to be able to do many roles, where we want to design vehicles for roles. I think that was kind of the reason behind it. Yeah.
I mean, my reasoning is it shouldn't take away from the the role specification of things. Like I say, you have a 68 round or a 250 mil round that will destroy things much better, even than a 40 mil would. But in terms of a support weapon, like if you lose your your vehicle or whatever that's holding that position of a tank destroyer in a tank line, maybe a Logi Boy comes down, brings like some AP shells for one of the tanks. It's it's a good little holdout. Plus as if you take a ballista, that's your part of the tank line or whatever. An LT wouldn't be able to do the same damage, but it'd be really good like backing it up and can maybe hit from different angles.
Yeah. I think we do have to close this one out, but Mark, did you have any final thoughts?
It's been 7 minutes already, mama.
No, I don't think anything specific comes to mind. I think my only final thought is like I'm excited about the idea of just adding like more higher end things, kind of like more like mountain goals to shoot for like the really dedicated players at the end. And the one part that does still feel sort of missing is that kind of just stops, and then everyone's just using their like medium tanks at the end game, and the second tier doesn't really matter as much as it should. So I think that is just one area that I feel like needs something, right? So
I just really quickly ask, cross-faction VoIP, is that still a technical problem, or is that now a conscious decision because you don't want to expose people to toxicity? Because if it is, you realise you're missing out on a huge part of the magic of the game, like hearing the enemy speak or doing a psyop.
Technical. It's pure technical, right, Mark?
It's purely technical.
Okay, cool.
I liked cross.
It's great. It's one of the
strat,
charms
yeah.
of this game was hearing the enemy over
Yep.
when you're chasing
Pure
them as the
technical.
partner's out and you say
Always
stop,
been
stop,
technical.
stop, and he thinks you're a friend and you kill him. Amazing. That's the charm. You know what I mean? That's
I mean,
that's part of the
it's
Foxhole charm.
not just trash talking. There's like moments where
Yeah. Gotcha. There's loads of crazy good moments. None of it's not the toxic stuff. Forget that stuff.
There's
That's just silly stuff.
cross faction players that are friendly to each other through local voice
I've had
chat.
some amazing conversations when you're in the back line and you jump in some major generals LUV and he's like, "What do we do now?" We're both sitting in it, and you just have this conversation while he drives you around, and then you kill each other. It's great. You know, like,
Yeah.
It's safe to say that as long as it's disabled, there is a problem that hasn't been worked out.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right.
But we'll leave.
Hey,
Fireman, just get his
gentlemen.
question real quickly because we just overspoken. Me and
Oh,
Maggo
sorry,
will
we
leave.
can't.
Can
We got to move on.
It's fine.
Sorry.
See you guys.
Farewell. We'll talk to you soon about the rocket and at Orbreaker that no one remembers, I'm sure. See ya. All right, coming up next is Psalm, the Swords of Morrow's Nocturne. Nocturne, thank you for your patience. What do you have for us?
Oh, I am here with my grand ideas for making tanks and other sort of vehicles much more enjoyable for both factions.
Go for it.
Alright, so Owen's always like, we need our own version of, the colonial sort of vehicle, and I'm of any sort, really, and I'm like, okay, that actually does kind of make sense, because you want to think of this from, like, a warfare standpoint. It's like, enemy comes out with a certain type of new vehicle, you're like, well, how do we combat it? And the field cannons are kind of like a sort of good step towards that, because it's like, okay, we need something to break the armor of the heavy tank destroyer. What do? We take a high-powered cannon and make it mobile on wheels, and then just slap it out there, and that's sort of a good stepping stone towards it. But you're still left with that sort of issue in the end where there's lingering holes in between things. Like, for example, the armored cars. No one likes to use them at all, because once you tech them, it's like they're good for a tiny amount of time, but none. It's like, oh, now we have a half track, which is basically an armored car, but better.
Oh yeah, I've seen the memes.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah,
I interrupted you.
That's all right. But yeah, so how do we kind of keep the vehicles with their niche, but also kind of make them usable forward? I think a sort of solution to that would be, as the war progresses, you can kind of repurpose these vehicles to like, let's say for the armored car. As the war progresses and you get like let's say a radio backpack, or not even a radio backpack, but just like kind of the LEVs with the radios on them. You have the armored car now has the ability to kind of scout. It's an armored scouting vehicle that also has like a self-defense purpose, kind of like how the colonials have our scouting LUV that has more armor, and you can kind of shoot off the top of it.
So you're saying add upgrades to lower tier vehicles when you get to the later tech tree. So to keep them relevant, you add things like the Intel option,
Yeah,
and things like that.
Before you go on, I just want to ask Mark, is it safe to say that ideally, maybe it's not happening now, but ideally, nothing in Foxhole should ever be obsolete? Niche, but not obsolete.
Yes, ideally, with a very big ideally in bold capital.
Yeah, certainly not. No, I think people could talk about the armored car all day long, but yeah, ideally. So go ahead, Nocturne, with that in mind, keep going.
So then I kind of put like some more ideas to paper, and kind of like, okay, so faction A has vehicle type and faction B does not. How can faction B kind of respond to it in a sort of way? And I'm sort of like thinking in between like real world examples and like fictional examples. So like a real world example would be, how do wardens kind of respond to the massive tank spam? To which I say, recoilless rifles, like the M18 recoilless rifle that's able to be mass produced in mass it's kind of like a one-shot weapon and does a high amount of damage, both armor and health. But like I said, it's kind of like the Ink Fist, but instead of having its own kind of like punching range, it's kind of like more of a I'm far over here, they're over there, we shoot them, and then we just kind of run away.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So we moved away from making things like armored car relevant and onto, you're saying, giving some sort of mass producible like quality to weapons as a counter.
Yeah. So like for
Interesting. Okay.
so like the armored cars, that's still kind of like the main crux of it, because that's something that I haven't really put much time in. It's like, how do we keep older vehicles more relevant? And that's something like only the people with like the actual kind of data in mind and everything. So that's more of a development side of, you know.
Yeah, one thing we've actually thought of with that's kind of along that lines is reducing the logistical requirements of lower tech vehicles as the war progresses. So an example would be like if you could somehow haul a pack of like a crate full of armored cars and shove them into a town hall, and now it's these armored cars um, are less like these high barrier things where you gotta go on a journey to get the armats and drive them to the front and all this stuff. If they became more of like, hey, even a random can spawn there and say, hey, there's like 15 armored cars in this town hall, I can pull one out and use it. Maybe that will make it a lot more relevant. It'll be a bit more like a weapon. Which I think this is an idea that I think we're still thinking about exploring. Like, for example, if field guns could potentially work that way, that'd be great. I think with that, there's always the fear on our end of like, would that nerf the infantry game too much if suddenly everyone had something like an armored car, right? So that's sort of the negative trade-off for that particular thing. But I think like in general, making things lower tech, more mass producible is an interesting um, solution we haven't really looked at yet. I don't know. Yeah. So
Sort of final parting idea. So with that kind of kept in mind, I think sort of like a field garage might be like a sort of solution to that, in which you bring BMATs in for like these early on vehicles that required R mats. You bring BMATs in, you stuff them in the field garage, and then it's like, okay, I spawn at the town hall. Here's the field garage next to the town hall that someone built, or maybe it's just a place structure in the world already. Who knows? Go over there. I'm like, all right, what do I want? Today I would like an armored car. Yeah, let's go with that. Or maybe one day I want a motorcycle, and then just
it's a really cool idea.
Takes like a minute or so, and it just builds and pops out right there. And all people have to do is just bring BMATs.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, the talking about ideals, I actually think that driving vehicles from your logi towns is not ideal. I think it's just been the way things have been, and we haven't had time, or we haven't had a good solution in resolving that. But in my perfect foxhole, like this is like this is you know um, in the vision, so to call it, right? I would love it if like um, there was this bigger logistical requirement to, maybe not bigger. There's a requirement to bring things like tanks and armored cars and those sorts of things to the front, but the optimal. Let me take a few steps back. In my ideal version, the optimal way to get tanks on the field is not to equip and ready them at the back line and drive them front. It would be to drive something like through a freighter or something like a train. You just bring tons of tanks to the front, and now you would set them up at the front as opposed to setting them up at the back and driving them forward. That would be my personal ideal version of that, right? I don't know how we arrived at this conversation, but
I mean, I don't like it. It's like a good sort of train of thought.
yeah,
I think we got to close out on this. But yeah. Hey, Nocturne, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Hey, some calls take a while to get there, but honestly, every nugget of revelation is always nice. Cool Death 49. Oh, with a Roblox profile pic. I'm all about this. Cool Death 49. Welcome to Zero Dark PressCorps. What do you have for us?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me here. My topic will be today about the field cannons coming from update 44 for this one. I'd like just to start off by saying hello, Mark. I'd like to ask, how are you doing?
Oh, thanks. That's very polite of you. I'm doing well.
Okay, well that's good to hear. Quickly before we get going, there's a random quick question coming from one of my friends, or fellow colleagues. Fireman is quickly asking, will the progression bars for levels and experience be coming back? I just want a quick yes or no, maybe a quick explanation if you want.
No.
No? Okay. Do you mind summarizing why?
Because I think we're going to. That's an area of the game that we're going to revisit quite heavily, and we're not probably going to invest in improving the existing versions for much longer. That's
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So,
yeah. I think. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to ask that, Mark. Do you think that there'll be no progression system ever, right? That's safe to say. Still safe to say.
In terms of what? That can mean a lot of things.
Sorry, skill points. Like, hey, I can upgrade my character with this XP or whatever.
No. That's not
okay.
Being
so you want to retool it into something that has more functionality or meaning behind it.
Yeah. I think like a better version of what's there already. So things like it'd be cool if things like the command system was a bit more sophisticated and but yeah, more of like expanded out version of what's there than like suddenly adding in level like stat points and stuff like that is probably not. Yeah.
All right, cool. Death. What'd you have for us?
Yeah, field cannons. Yeah, thank you for responding to that quick spontaneous question. It's just about the field cannons coming from this update. I do have a series of questions. My first one being, Markfoot, what are your current opinions on specifically the field cannons? What do you feel? How do you feel about them? Are you happy with how they turned out? Do you think there can be improvements? But what are your overall opinions?
Does that include just the Warden field cannons or all the the field ATN?
Negative. I'm talking about just the field anti-tank, like the updates you've done to them overall.
Okay, I'm gonna Okay, I'm gonna assume you mean like field AT, field cannon.
Yeah. When I speak of field cannon, I should when I speak of field cannon, I mean field AT, field field, yeah, stuff like that. If I want to mention the Warden field cannon, I'll just say field cannon.
I think that maybe I'll start more general.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're not talking specifically about how do I feel about how these latest ones worked out, but more in general.
I'll go into that later, but just for now, talk in general. Are you happy?
Yeah. So in general, this is kind of related to the question that the last caller was talking about. I really want to improve the accessibility of them at the front. Like, I really feel I want field guns to feel special in that regard. Like, it's almost easier to field than something like a tank. But right now, in some ways, in some ways it's more complicated because you need two people to kind of wheel it up. And so I would like to figure out some way to change or improve the way that how accessible they are at the front, essentially, right?
Okay,
Like,
so you're. Sorry, go ahead.
so like, you know, obviously a lot of people have asked for things like field gun towing. I don't know. I don't know if that will happen. Obviously, you can bring them up with a flatbed, but the requirements of that is quite steep. But just some way to like bring them up more easily, or like the last suggestion, if there was some field garage type deal thing where you can bring up a crate and then
Right.
you shove in like 5 of them at once or something of that sort.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're content, but you think there can still be a lot of improvement.
Um.
Or I wouldn't say content, but you're proud of what you've done.
I think I like field guns. So I'm really critical of them. So I can sit here all afternoon and name a bunch of things that I'd like to improve. But yeah. So
All right. Well, that's good enough for me. My next question. Actually, this will
This will be our last one. Yeah.
All right. There is this infamous debate between the Warden High Velocity field cannon and its comparison to the Colonial High Velocity FAT. Many of my Warden counterparts have been saying that its damage output is comparably higher than the Colonial High Velocity FAT. What are your opinions about it?
yeah, I mean they're practically the same. So I think the higher is like just extremely marginal and inconsequential in practice. It's like just off by a couple of hairs, pretty much. So I don't think the damage difference is really a factor. I think that the Warden tanks have more armor, so the AT is an appropriate counter to have a higher penetration chance. So field AT has a higher pen chance, which makes sense because they're countering the faction that has the higher amount of armor, and then the disproportionate high damage on the Warden one makes sense because the Colonial tanks have slightly more health. So and they're designed to counter tanks from the other faction. So that's sort of why they were done that way. And some of the reason, another thing too that we didn't talk about before is these are tuned. There's some things that are coming in the roadmap that we think will achieve this result we're trying to achieve now in a more elegant way. These field guns right now are, I would say, a little overtuned as a bit of a stand-in until we can get a more
Stopgap.
exactly. It's a stop. Like if it seems a little bit weird, like oh man, these things are dealing like lots of damage.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, and something we're internally we're totally like, yeah, we kind of knew it would feel that way, and we feel that way too. But it is a bit of a stopgap solution,
Yeah, I
because I
understand
think that we have something that is coming that will feel more like, okay, it can be like that, but maybe there's more trade-offs and that sort of thing, right? So
Oh, great! Looking forward to it.
yeah.
Mr. Pressman, how much time do I have left, or do I
I
have
think
more?
we're at time.
Darn. All right. Well, thank you for featuring me today, Markfoot, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right, Mark, how much more you got in you?
I think it has to be a last one because there's things on the team that I got to get to.
Can you do a text question and a call?
Maybe if I give a quick answer, I'll do it. But my answers are going to be quick, most likely.
Do you feel like the vetting system for vehicles might get modified at some point in the future from Zackreaver? I know we kind of touched upon that a little earlier.
I think we're working on some tweaks for the I'm not promising anything, but we are looking at some tweaks for the tech tree. But again, it won't be a complete overhaul, and I don't want to say anything because this stuff is in progress, so things change, right? But yeah, sorry for the big answer, but that's the answer we're gonna have to settle with.
All right, is that all we have? Time for it?
I thought you said there was another.
Oh, there was? Okay. Oh no, this is so. Okay, well, Zackreaver is from the 82 DK, so we have to skip Liam, who's also from the 82 DK. I'm so sorry. So we're gonna have to go to Mirkinza Athnar. I've never actually had to say it out loud. From the 882 Regiment, also part of the PressCorps for the documentary work. But yes, Mirkinza Athnar, what do you have for us?
Hold on a second. Sorry, I've got the There you go. Sorry. Hello.
Hello. Yeah. What do you have for us?
Cool. So first of all, can I say thank you, Mark, for your time and talking to us all. My point was, yes. So with weather, we were talking about it earlier. So obviously there is a slight balance problem at the moment. Everyone knows it. If you go on the onto the Reddit for just a few moments, you'll know that every warden is complaining about it. I'm a colonial personally, but I do agree that there is a slight imbalance between the tech. And my suggestion was that you could sort of counter this by with the weather effects. We've got obviously within law the I believe the wardens are meant to be north, and they usually spawn on the north on the map where it's colder. And so my thought was sort of you could have faction-specific weather items, and like maybe the wardens deal with the cold slightly better, like fighting in Russia or whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a great idea. I think yeah. I mean, I think it just makes sense, and to be honest, I think it's just only a matter of time before we do something like that. That's kind of
So it would give the wardens a bit of an advantage in the cold weather, and then the colonials a bit of an advantage in the rainy weather.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
I'm sorry. Is this for certain items, like new items, or for like vehicles and just general effects?
Oh, I hadn't even thought about vehicles. So my thought
But you weren't talking about vehicles. Were you talking about like infantry? Like all warden players aren't as affected?
So at the moment, obviously, there's a timer, and you just freeze to death eventually. So maybe the timer could be, obviously that's you were talking earlier about how that's subject to change. But if that was to just as an example, if you were to change that, would you could just slightly increase the timer for the wardens or something like that, that sort of thing.
sorry, I missed that. I missed that last part.
So essentially, with the freezing to death timer, you could maybe increase it slightly, or
right.
Maybe they could see through the blizzard slightly better, or something like that.
Yeah.
So inherent abilities for whatever faction you choose.
Oh, you're saying inherent without any equipment?
Without any equipment.
I think either work. I mean,
first of all, we'll say without equipment. Mark, thoughts?
I think we thought about. I was talking to Julian or someone on the team today about what was it? I can't talk about it without spoiling some.
That's well. I mean, there's like the thought of like how Russians are better in winter, but I think that's kind of like people are arguing that's like a genetic thing that like Russians are naturally resistant to the cold. Yeah, maybe a little bit over millennia, but like I think it more has to do with the fact like with Barbarossa and like how the Germans got bogged down. It's more so the fact that the Russians weren't just literally more resistant to cold, and they didn't get any hypothermia. It's that it's their homeland, so they're more prepared for these things. As opposed to the Germans who are just wandering around.
Imagine one faction could actually run slightly faster than the other. How painful would that be, man?
That would. No.
Yeah. Don't worry, we're not doing
Okay,
that.
with clothing. Oh, good. With clothing and things like that. So you know,
So
the wardens could have
asymmetrical
a slight
weather
boost.
equipment. Asymmetrical weather
Yeah.
equipment.
Yeah.
Is that something, Mark, you'd be open to?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Definitely. I think it could extend to equipment as well.
Ooh, here's a thought. So if there's a warden winter clothing and a colonial winter clothing, can one faction put on the other's clothing, and will that make them dress like the other faction?
Oh yeah, that
I think that comes with a host of problems.
yeah, that one. That's a good
Try
one, man.
balancing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think no answers on that yet because that's a whole other quandary. But did you have anything else, Mirkinza, or was it? Yeah.
I had briefly. I was going to talk about the camera aspect ratio thing. That was briefly spoken about earlier. I was just wondering, is there an idea that you could literally like?
Sorry, you might have cut out.
I think you cut out. Say again.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I can't. No, I think that's all. I can't think of the actual question I'm trying to. I was gonna suggest something, but I don't remember what it was.
Was it related to weather? You said the
No,
camera,
it was
actually.
related to the camera. Yeah, the camera aspect ratio problem. The Oh, so I wasn't playing at the time. It was a while ago, but apparently there was briefly a thing where you could just go into the files and change the thing, which again was spoken about earlier. Would it be worth actually just sort of zooming the camera out slightly and slightly further than the actual draw distance in order to to fix the loading problems and things like that, and the corner aiming and stuff?
Yeah, no, I definitely that's part of the game that we're looking at.
Further than the draw distance. So you're saying that once you reach the edges, you'll just see nothing, like a black circular thing.
Well, not really. More of a maybe you can see buildings or something like that, like general terrain things, but not people or something like that, possibly.
Like you're thinking
I guess it's like a fog of war.
Yeah, I think what is being described here is something. Have you ever played a game where there's sort of like a desaturation effect that occurs outside of? It's kind of like it's like fog of war in Warcraft. You can still see I'm talking about like the original Warcraft and Warcraft 2. You can still see areas like the terrain and things, but you don't get any updates. Like it doesn't show you anything active there, right? You just see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a neat idea, actually, and one that we've.
I know one. I don't know if it was ever addressed. It's like one of the top Reddit posts of all time, maybe on like the second or third page. But it was like, you know how when you're aiming, right? Corner aiming is the standard. So if you try to aim directly up, not like up vertically, but like instead of the corners, it's like the edges of the screen. The north, south, east, west screen. You can't see as far. Is there a way to mitigate that so that it evenly distributes in a circular fashion, so that way corner aiming is kind of, I don't know. I think corner aiming is just something that we've just accepted, but it's really dumb when you think about it, and you can be reminded of this by every new person who plays the game.
Yeah, so that problem you described, or
Yes.
rather that solution is not as trivial as it sounds.
Okay.
Because the way, like, you're basically saying if you point up, the camera will actually move out more or zoom out more than it does when you're aiming at the corner. That's what you're saying, right?
Or at least an equalized way to do it, so that way you don't have to aim at the corners, but rather just you can just aim in any direction.
So we've actually fully implemented that system in the past internally, and it's really hard to do without it feeling janky because you're moving in Foxhole you're moving your mouse, right? and your screen is also moving at the same time, right?
Hmm.
So, which is already kind of a bit hard to deal with. If you're also contending with the amount that it's moving changes depending on where the mouse is, it's a very subtle thing, but it actually feels really janky when you do that.
And
We've
in your opinion, it's worse than the current system.
it. I think that usability wise, just like how smooth it feels. I think like if you're okay, let me put it this way: if
It's
you're
not worth implementing.
if you're a purist, no, like we implemented the whole thing, right? Like we actually spent a lot of time on this. In fact, 2 different people have taken a pass on this already. Like we tried
Okay.
something about a year and a half ago, and then more recently we tried. But it's like I'll say this: if you're a purist in gameplay, maybe you'll like that better because it technically works. You will actually, when you point to the side of the screen, it actually feels like it reins it in more, so you actually see less. When you move it up, it actually moves it out. So from the standpoint of like, I just purely care about the gameplay and I don't care about the touch and feel, right? You will like that system better. If you care about touch and feel, then that system is worse, right? So maybe there's some sort of in between or something like that, right? Where it fixes the gameplay and it also doesn't feel terrible, right? Yeah.
That's something I had actually never considered before.
Yeah.
But I just know that I try to bring people in, and then they go, "What is cornering? This is dumb." And it's like, I don't know. So I do know there's a lot of technical stuff behind it.
Yeah.
And as clearly mentioned just now.
Yeah. Hey, like this is definitely something that we're looking into, right? So it's not.
Okay.
I agree that this is not an issue where we're like, okay, well, we're gonna settle with this in the long run, right? So, yeah.
For sure. All right. Hey, Mirkinza, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and I think we're at time. Mark, thank you so much for taking time out of your Siege Camp, work hours to come talk to the community. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. I'll see you around. Have a good one.
Have a good day. Bye.
All right. Well, that's all we have time for. When can we do it at this time again? That's a fantastic question. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, as soon as I found out that I had time to do this at this time, I immediately messaged Mark. It's a special one-time thing. We'll see. I will try and insert it whenever possible because we hate. Well, first of all, we hate keeping the Europe people up until like 4 a.m. Just so that they can get their questions in. And 2, we do want to be more comprehensive with it. So, will we ever get to Asia/Anzac times? I don't know about that. I might be able to. I don't know if Mark or any dev would be able to do that. I guess it'd have to be in the morning, right? I don't know. But we do. It is part of our mission to serve the community, and the community composes of everyone across the globe. Make no mistake about it. But yeah, hey, thank you so much for listening in. And yes, I've mentioned it multiple times, but I just want to say for sure that we are working on a War 75 mini documentary. Not the whole thing. It's from day 500 to day 749, which is the last day of the war. And there are multiple reasons why we've honed in on it. One of the leading reasons is that I don't have the time for that. But please, take the survey that is in the PressCorps Discord. It's in announcements. I'm going to remove that Zero Dark announcement. And there you go. So it's the big announcement post there for you see the War 75 late war experience submission form. Go ahead and take that survey and answer as detailed as you possibly can. Tell stories, please. We want paragraphs as much as you can fit in there. And additionally, share that link, share that survey with as many people. We've had, I believe, 60 or so responses, which is fantastic. but the more the merrier, and we'd love to see as much data on that as possible. As for when that documentary, that mini doc, will be released, no idea. The War 19 documentary took 1 year, and that was basically that person's full-time job who did nothing else in terms of gaming, in terms of Foxhole. In that time, it was literally just all on documentary, over 500 hours dedicated to. It's actually documented. He documented that time working on that documentary. So we wanna not spend as much time on that, but potentially also working on it for many months. But we duly appreciate you taking the time to take that survey, and we hope to get some more fantastic stories in the meantime. Keep tuned to PressCorps Radio. At least enjoy the music. We try and go on the air when we can, but it's few and far between because, especially now with the documentary, it's gonna keep us busy. But thank you for joining Zero Dark PressCorps this time around. We hope to catch you in the future. For the PressCorps, I'm Geoffrey Jennings. Good night and good bite. And good bite, good fight. There we go. I'm hungry.
The PressCorps is a non-profit creative collective of artists, reporters, and players from the MMO video game Foxhole by Clapfoot. Our mission is to engross our audience in and amplify the stories of this unique war ecosystem. The PressCorps was founded in early 2018 by former PlanetSide 2 Radio Free Araxis host, Captain in Arms. It is a separate community entity and is in no way representative of Clapfoot. For more info, visit the PressCorps Discord through the link below.